This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and I am flying solo today. So today we've got a sponsored episode for you. We have these conversations from time to time with some of our partners in the industry to get some more insights into how they approach the market, maybe some of the technologies and tools and capabilities and thoughts and ideas that they bring to the table. So without further ado, let me introduce today's sponsor. We've got Natoma. It's natoma.id, Natoma. And I want to welcome to the show for the first time, Paresh Bhaya. He's the co-founder at Natoma. So welcome to the show, Paresh.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Really an honor to be here. Been listening to IDAC for a really long time. Really a big fan. And I'm glad to be joining you guys today.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you taking the time. I know that you're currently in India, so it's like 2 or 3 a.m. is the time we're recording this. So we're kind of joking before we hit record here that it's like, all right, it's the middle of your day. And so it's either uphill or downhill from here, depending on which way you want to look at it.
I have no idea which way it's going to go, but it all depends on how the next 30 minutes go.
All right, fair enough. Well, why don't we start with your background? So one of the things we like to ask our guests the first time they've been on the show with us is how they got into identity. So I'd love to hear your identity origin story. Is it something that you chose or did it choose you?
I would have to definitely say the field chose me. It's sort of both, but it definitely the field chose me. I mean, my background, just as a quick background, I'm engineer by education, was a software developer. I was in secure networking, network security, wireless security, and I was working at Salesforce under the CISO organization. And that's where, cloud, it was the transition from network security to cloud security, and identity was that's the next big thing, and identity security is becoming big. And somehow just got into identity, and the next step from Salesforce was at Okta. Of course, Okta is identity company, was PMM, leading PMM product strategy for their new age products in a way. Having said that, I definitely agree the field kind of picked me as much as it was very concentrated effort on my end to go into identity. I definitely have to give a shout out to Identity at the Center. I've been listening to you guys for a really long time. During my fitter days, if you may, when I used to run, I used to put on IDAC and go for a quick run. And that was somehow always, as I was thinking of identity and identity becoming the center of the security world, listening to you guys, I felt like maybe I should really somehow try to get into identity. So here I am.
Well, I appreciate that. Flattery will get you everywhere on this show. So definitely off to a good start.
It's a true story. Trust me. I do remember even I had actually, even at Salesforce, I taken a identity role, or I was working under Ian Glazier. Of course, everybody knows Ian in the identity world. Was working with him, and I was trying to get into the identity side. And I used to listen to you guys, and I actually leverage stuff that I heard on this podcast over a number of sessions over the period of time. So
that's super cool. I mean, that's very flattering for me. So I definitely appreciate that. You're kind of coming on at a momentous time for us. So when this airs, we'll have been around for about 6 years now, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. And I would have thought we'd have run out of stuff to talk about at 50 episodes, but here we are. This should be, I think, episode 363 or kind of around there. I do want to talk a little bit about Natoma itself, because I've seen some of the things you guys are working on. I met up with Samira and some others in Identiverse recently, and you've got a great team there that you're kind of working on this. But I want to give you an opportunity to kind of tell us about Natoma itself. So tell me, give me the elevator pitch for what it is that Natoma does in the market, especially for the identity stuff.
No, absolutely. Natoma, we basically help enterprises accelerate their AI adoption without really compromising security. And we really think of it, as I was been saying, identity is at the center of security. So how do we really kind of think about all of that identity pieces as you accelerate AI agent adoption? How do you really make sure security is not compromised? And that means authentication, authorization, the access, And we are going into a world of where these agents will start uh, acting on behalf of humans, doing stuff on its own. And if we get into that part, you really want the right level of authentication authorization. And that's what Natoma does. Really help accelerate AI agent adoption, but security being the paramount there.
I mean, it seems like it's a pretty good time to be getting into that, considering the way that agentic AI has really exploded recently here, huh?
Yeah, I definitely agree to that. I mean, I don't know if it's the right time to get into it, but we are definitely at that inflection point where you really need to make sure you have right security guardrails as you're thinking about. I mean, Gen AI definitely changes the game in many, many ways. And especially if you think about it, we've just been using from a consumer standpoint as enterprises start really adopting Gen AI, be it for productivity tools, be it for simplifying all the workflows that you have, it really, really elevates the game. And if you're really thinking about, as I was saying, the world where these agents start operating and executing and planning for you, security, authentication, authorization, all of that becomes super critical.
But tell me about the name Natoma. I always curious about the names of products in this space. What does Natoma mean? Does it mean anything? Like, how'd you come up with that?
It's a great name, right? What do you think of the name?
I don't even know what to think about. It's so unique that I don't have like a definition or even associated with it in my brain. That's why I'm like, where does this come from?
No, so I'll tell you the actual meaning of the name. So Natoma actually means clear water in Native American language. There's a lake called Lake Natoma near Sacramento. And it's very unique name. One of the criterias was to make sure the name that we pick for the company, it's very easy to pronounce. And coming from India, English as a second language, the world is flat. You're working with a lot of different parts of the world. It should be, no matter where you are from, what accent you have, it should be very, very easy to pronounce. But the real story, if you want to know,
of course, yeah,
there is a bar called Natoma Cabana right behind of Okta. As I mentioned, I was at Okta, and right behind Okta, my co-founders are also from Okta, and we used to go to the bar, and that's where we used to go. Think about this, talk about this. There's a street called Natoma right behind Okta, which leads to that bar called Natoma Cabana, and we used to walk there and walk to the bar. Lot of long chats, lot of long meetings, lot of different meetings, meeting different people around the AI space on how to do it. Of course, with a glass of beer in hand. And as we were kind of starting off, we were thinking of a name for the company, and we said, why not Natoma? It's all the criteria that I put in place. Like, hey, it should be very easy to pronounce. It's short. It should be unique. And we said, this is the name. We love it, and we go there.
That's super cool. I love hearing like these stories behind the scenes. So I gotta ask, the bar is named Natoma as well?
The bar's called Natoma Cabana.
All right. So do you use the Natoma like company name to like try to get free drinks or something? Like, hey, we're gonna name our company if you'll give us a little something at the bar every once in a while.
I've met so many people at the bar. Actually, literally a couple of weekends back, I met someone. I was at a wedding, and the person was like, you remember? Yeah, we met at that bar. We were talking about it. What was the bar name? I'm like, yeah, Natoma. That was the bar we used to everybody meet. We haven't told the bar yet that we called ourselves behind them inspired by the name. Hopefully they don't come back and sue us, or come back for some check saying, hey, you guys, we were the inspiration, so pay us back.
Okay, well, I'll get off that subject just to not draw any more light to that, just to kind of protect that. Let me put my jaded CISO hat on, though, here, because I feel like there's so many different security tools out there. It is impossible to keep up with everything. And especially in the identity space, it seems like there's something new all the time. I'm going to ask you a hard question here. Maybe use up some of those flattery points. So tell me, what is it that makes Natoma different or special or unique on how you approach the problems you're solving versus the others in the market that you would consider?
I have to say, I would say these things that really puts us apart, right? It's uniquely blending that efficiency with security, right? Uh, our platform is, we really believe in that one-click deployment model, right? Amazon kind of started that, and everybody wants to do it. So have that one-click deployment model, but also with like flexible deployment. Like, it's not just a hosting platform, you're not a infrastructure, but then you blend that with like the right level of security, right level of authorization, right level of access controls in place, right? So that's number one. Number two is we're really focused on end to end, right? Like the end to end user experience, not only just from like an admin experience, but even from like end user employees of an enterprise trying to use that, making sure that end to end user experience is really good. I hate to use this analogy, but we've taken the iPhone approach, right? You don't need a manual to use an iPhone. In fact, my being in India, my grandmom also uses an iPhone, right? Anybody can use an iPhone. That's the approach we've really taken. And the biggest and the best part is policy enforcement, right? Like you really need, as these AI agents get bigger and bigger, and as the proliferation happens, you really need like that dynamic access controls. You want to ensure like every agent has the right level of access, and the humans interacting with that agent have the right level of authorization on the actions they are taking. And as the world gets into like, agentic AI, where the agents are acting on behalf of humans, they have the right level of authorization. So it's that policy enforcement point. That is where we kind of bring in the unique selling point, differentiation for us in a way.
So you talk about that sort of explosion of the number of AI agents that are out there. And I guess as we get into this world of agentic AI that is being thrust upon us, really, there are so many different things. Is that the main problem? Is it the scale? Is it the volume that these things are happening? Are there other parts of the broader landscape of agentic AI that we also need to solve? Like, what are your thoughts on just what are the problems to solve for agentic AI from an identity perspective?
I mean, if I were to think about it a little bit more, right? Even before the scale and all of that piece, it's the discovery, right? Like you have your shadow AI that's happening these days. What do I mean by a shadow AI? It's like your AE going and connecting something to your Zoom and going and connecting something to your Salesforce, and you think that, hey, what's the big deal? But it has access to what Jeff has access to, right? And what is it? Where is it data? What data it's pulling? What kind of things you put? So that shadow AI, the shadow MCP discovery, that becomes really, really important first and foremost. And then once you kind of go beyond that, once you start getting, a little bit control around it, the second piece that really comes in is like, how do you make sure it's super easy to use, and it's actually delivering value from like an enterprise perspective, not just that, oh, it's so cool and it can look what it can do, but can it really actually go solve some of these problems in a way? And the last piece that is definitely top of mind is like, with new technologies, with new protocols, new threats come in. And how do we really, before this becomes like such a big problem and such proliferation happens, how do you really make sure that you have the right level of guardrails and right level of security in place for the new threats that are emerging? And new threats, some of them we know, some of them we don't even know about, right?
Yes, yeah, it's very hard to protect against the unknown right now, but there are certainly things that we know. You mentioned things like MCP, Model Context Protocol, and
Yep.
there's that's a new standard that's coming around. There's A to A. You also mentioned the time to value, and before I get to MCP and A to A, I do want to understand, like, how does Natoma, the customers you've got, how do they measure success when it comes to getting that value out of a deployment of Natoma? Like, what are some of the, key performance indicators or key metrics that are like, oh yeah, this is worth the investment that we've made in it? Do you have some things you want to share with the audience on that?
No, yeah, definitely. They're twofold, right? I mean, I keep going back to that ease of use cases. If you look at what our mission, even on our website, it's how do we accelerate AI adoption without compromising security? So it's that acceleration piece, right? That ease of use and that acceleration is what we double click on every single time we talk to our customer, and every single time we go and do a pilot and go and convert a customer. That is the value they get. It's like, hey, okay, how easy was it? And how did we really help you increase the productivity, right? If you think about like the journey that enterprises are today in terms of like adopting agentic AI or AI agents, is everything is around uh, productivity and improving productivity. So a simple use case could be leveraging these AI coding assistants, right? You the, you can leverage those AI coding assistants as a developer. It does improve productivity. Everybody agrees to it, but it can really enhance it if you're connecting this to enterprise tools and data, right? So if you have like, let's say, a GitHub Copilot, or if you're looking at a cursor, and how are you connecting back to your GitHub and to your Jira and your linear tickets and Atlassian world, how easy do we make it for admins to give the right level of controls to make sure that how easily it is these tools are getting connected? But then from the other side also, how easy it is for end users to make sure their developers tools are connected to these enterprise things. So if you tie those two back together, so that becomes like, what is the value it's really delivering, how quickly they were able to accelerate, and how much did the productivity improve, right? So that acceleration piece of it. And also it depends. I mean, that's one specific use case. If you think about like AI agents, right? What is the end user enterprise's goal? What are the use cases they want to solve? So it could be anything from like, IT operations or security operations, and like trying to simplify some of those things. So what is the number of tickets that they have reduced, and how much, security operations, how much did it really help you? How quickly you were able to go solve a new alert and get into the bottom of the new alert. So depending on, basically, we always, always, always tie back the success of our platform back to what the customer wants to do with it. And that means understanding customers' use cases and understanding what are their goals. If their goals is that IT operations and reducing the number of IT tickets, did we help them deliver that? And if we measure the success there, boom, we are successful. If it is employee productivity, did we really quantifiably improve that productivity? Boom, we are successful.
So you mentioned MCP and sort of tying things together. I think this is still new terminology for a lot of people out there with MCP and model context protocol, and then A to A or agent to agent. And I guess the way I kind of described it is this is sort of like the connective tissue or the glue of how different AIs are supposed to talk to each other and resources to get into. But you're probably more of an expert than I am on that. So I'd love to hear like your definition of what MCP and A to A is. And then how does that relate to the kind of stuff that you work on?
Yeah, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm like definitely not an expert, but I'll try my best. If I were to take, you want to understand why we need MCP and what is MCP, like I always like to start with the why, right? Like as Mr. Simon Sinek always says, start with the why. I truly believe in that. Why do we need MCP? So we have to take like a step back. Let's go back like a couple of years, right? I mean, or maybe even a few years back. This whole thing basically started with Google coming out with, Google Brain team coming out with the transformer models, and OpenAI comes out with Chat GPT in 2022. Was it 22 in December or whenever? And that completely changed the game, right? But it changed the game from a consumer use case. It was like a Q&A. It was like, oh my God, look, it can do this. Oh my God, I can go actually search and get better search results. And it's sure it was a game changer, but it was very consumer driven. Even if you look at like the worldwide conference from Apple recently, right? They were talking about Apple Intelligence. And what is Apple Intelligence? It's talking about like, hey, tell me what's the status of my mom's flight? That was the example they used. And what were they doing behind the scenes? Apple Intelligence was going and talking to your email, figuring out what was the schedule your mom was supposed to come in, goes online, figure out like what's the status of the flight, and it's kind of giving responses back. So point being, all of these were great for end user consumer use cases. Where MCP comes in, or where Gen AI was lacking, was around enterprise use cases. And what do I mean by that? To get real actual benefit, like, I mentioned like these use cases, number of tickets, and like, these some of these automated stuff you could really reduce. You can really do that when you connect Gen AI to enterprise tools and data and applications. This is where the brains of the enterprise is. This is where everything is posted. So if you're really connecting if you really want to connect your AI agents, your LLMs, your models to enterprise tools and data, that is the biggest challenge. That is when you really unlock the power of Gen AI, but that is also the biggest challenge. And that's where MCP comes in. That's where it kind of changes the game. So let's talk about it. How was it done before MCP? You connect your LLM models to your enterprise tools and data. You were leveraging API calls, right? You were just doing like bespoke API integrations and connecting to that. So if you want to build like 10 agents, right, or 10 clients, and you have 10 data sources or 10 applications on this side, every single time you may build a use case with one agent and you're connecting to this 10 data sources, and boom, this is powerful. It's like a very bespoke manual integration. You try to go build another one, you have to redo all of those 10 again. So it was that M cross N problem. You have 10 on this side, 10 on this side. So you're looking at 100 different integrations and API proliferation, and won't even get me started. The challenges there, right? Where MCP comes in, it's an RPC protocol. So it is still a client server protocol. But what it does is actually is a wrapper on APIs, and it actually leverages that client to server integration. So for all your, like the 10 data sources or applications or services that you had, you can create servers for that, MCP servers for that. And now you can have all these agents just talking to these servers. So if you have this one use case, one agent that you build for these, once you build another agent, you don't need to restart and recreate all of those things. So you go from that 10 cross 10 to 10 plus 10. So it's a model native way to provide context to all of your LLMs in a way. So these LLMs, they become powerful when you provide your data context to them, right? So that's the magic of MCP. The other big magic, in my opinion, is what they call as dynamic self-discovery. I think this is like a very underlying unknown power, if you say. What do I mean by that? It's like when these agents, they boot up without changing any code, you can just tell them that, hey, there is this MCP server. So it boots up and it goes and say, okay, I see there's some MCP server. Let me go and figure out what that server can give. And overnight, without doing any changes, you can add actions. You can connect different data sources or data tools, applications, but you can also provide different actions to it, right? So it can actually, at boot up time, do that dynamic self-discovery and automatically become more powerful. And that's why I really believe this MCP is like a massive game changer in terms of like how you can provide that context to your LLMs and things like that. And that's where the world is going. If you think about it from a to A perspective, that's when the agents to agents start interacting with that, right? MCP was started, developed, like it's such a young protocol to begin with. It was announced in November 25 by Anthropic. And here we are 6 months in, like it has been like adopted by the community. There's been so much, it's an open source protocol. So much community development has happened onto it. And to build on top, Google came out with A to A protocol. And what's the theory there? Awesome. MCP is great when you want to connect your LLMs and your agents to your enterprise data sources. But the world is going where these, as I was saying, these agents will kind of interact and talk with each other, and they'll like plan, strategize, execute on its own. So you really want domain specific smaller agents, right? So think about like agents which are small agent that's connected to your sales force and doing some sales stuff. And then you have a different agent which is going and doing its marketing stuff. And when these agents need to talk to each other, they end up leveraging the agent to agent protocol in a way. But I'm sure as you're thinking through all of this and like agent identity and like human identity, like it opens up a massive identity access authorization can of worms. But it's not only just that. With newer protocols, it opens up newer security challenges, newer vulnerabilities as well.
I mean, the explosion of this has been crazy. And I think we've used the word explosion like 5 times so far in this conversation, but it's probably the most accurate way to describe it because it's accelerated so quickly. And to see the technical, groups get behind this. I mean, I've seen standard developments in the past that takes years, but this is moving very quickly to all of a sudden say, okay, well, there's a bunch of big names supporting MCP and A to A and all that good stuff. I'm just curious, like, how do you navigate, developing product at the same time these things are still being developed? And, maybe they're not even on solid ground yet, or maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I'm not as close to it probably as you are, but, is there a common set of rules that have been established that you can effectively start building capabilities and services on top of those things while they're still building sort of the rest of the boat?
Yes and no. I mean, it does we as technologists, when we start building new stuff, we always just want to move at 1,000 miles per hour, right? So is the protocol like solid and it's like being like thought through and there are no holes to it? Absolutely not. Having said that, is the protocol well adopted and here to stay? 100%. Will it keep evolving? Will it keep changing? 100%. But that's the magic of like a startup, right? Like you are really at the bleeding edge and you are really thinking through like where this can go, right? Nobody knows. Everybody's trying to figure the puzzle out. And here we are also trying to figure the puzzle out. So does it make you nervous? It does, but it also makes you think harder and it actually makes you like, I feel that passion and that excitement. It's like, oh, we need to go figure this out. Like nobody has figured it out. Like, so we'll be probably the first one to figure it out in a way.
Well, if you wait for perfection, it'll never happen, right? If we waited for OAuth to be done, like the problem would have been insurmountable.
Yes, absolutely. You're so true. And OAuth, even for MCP, there are certain RFCs for OAuth that needs to be adopted and could potentially change, So
let's talk a little about that facilitating of the connections between LLMs and agents. I feel like this is an area that is sort of now coming to light because everyone says like ChatGPT comes out and you got Gemini and Claude and you name it, it's out there. What is the powerful part is connecting to that data. Now, me as an enterprise user or owner of enterprise data, I got to make sure that I am really secure and really sure that whatever's accessed my data is correct and they are authorized to access that particular data. I think this is where those connections between a let's say a generative LLM versus a resource or a company specific data repository, you've got to make sure that connection is secure. And then you've also got to make sure the connection to the agents that might be interacting with either of those things is secure as well. Can you talk a little bit about how Natoma approaches that connectivity and that facilitation?
No, absolutely. Yeah. So that's where we really play, right? That's really ensuring that as these LLMs, these agents are kind of interacting those enterprise data, as you said, for enterprises, that is your IP, and that is what is your secret sauce in a way, right? And as you're trying to connect these models, LLMs, these AI agents for your use cases to the data, we kind of play in that middleware. And what we provide, that Natoma Agent Access provides, is basically 3 layers of authentication and authorization control. So step 1 is basically, of course, we leverage OAuth along the way, but step 1 is is this agent even allowed to talk to a certain data? So let's take GitHub as an example, right? You have agent 1, is agent 1 allowed to talk to GitHub? So you can configure that through Natoma that, hey, only agent 1 in your enterprise is allowed to talk to GitHub. But it's not only that, we don't stop there. Then we provide the next layer of it. Okay, agent 1 can talk to GitHub, but agent 1 can only do such and such actions. So you can control what tools are being passed back, as LLMs, we call it tools. What agent, this agent's LLMs, what actions can it take in your downstream applications? And the third piece is what you were talking about. When users interact with these agents, or when users are when these agents are acting behalf of users, what can they do, right? So let's say we take, continuing on that GitHub example, let's say only agent 1 is allowed to talk to GitHub. You say, hey, you can actually do list commit with this agent, but you can't do batch commits, for example. And then when Jeff is interacting with this particular agent, you can actually go and do Jeff can do list commits, but it should be able to do list commits of only the repos Jeff has access to, versus when, say, Paresh is going and doing list commits, it should do only for the, repos that Paresh has access to. So really tying back that authorization, fine-grained authorization of the end users into it. And that is where we really play. So it's at 3 levels of access and fine-grained authorization. Because
So
you
what
are
does it
getting
take?
into
No, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, you are getting into a world where eventually these agents are going to act on behalf of Jeff, and they are going to become smarter. They are going to start executing. They know when to, we are moving away from today enterprises work in that workflow environment, right? There is hey, new employee comes in, so that triggers okay, somebody needs to create a user in Workday, and then that's going to push down into Okta, and new laptop needs to be shipped out, and need to provide medical insurance and whatever. So there's some chain of events. We are getting into a point where enterprises are going away from that workflow strategy into doing some works, and that will become conversational, right? LLMs are doing this. You don't need to have somebody is going to join it. It can completely change that workflow model, in my opinion. And that's where having that right level of controls is very important.
Well, that opens up a question of, okay, so if I have a bunch of agents that are acting on my behalf, how do me as the user, direct those agents onto what they can and can't do, and how ephemeral does that access need to live? Because maybe these agents are, they only live for maybe a few milliseconds to perform a specific task. I mean, they're shut down or decommissioned or whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's part of the challenge here, right? It's not only the scale, right, the number of them, but it's the speed with which these things can be created, destroyed, recycled, whatever you want to call it. Is that right?
Yep. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And this is where we really come in and play as well. It's you need to have those identities associated with those agents. So you really need to keep a list of that. But also when these become ephemeral. We really need to make sure that, uh, like, we provide you controls, we provide enterprises controls that if the agent is going to act on behalf of Jeff, it can only take certain actions. And if it really wants to take certain other actions, you need step up off. Like basically everything that we've learned in our identity practice over the years, how do we deploy that in a way, right? So bringing that, wearing that Okta hat back on, or like wearing those things. Hey, if the agent needs to do a certain action, we need human in the loop still. Jeff needs to come in and provide that biometric so you can control what actions the agent can take on behalf of as an impersonation versus when it can't take on acting on behalf of it, and a human in the loop is there.
I'm glad to hear that like we're getting smarter on how we approach some of these things. It's not like you can give a token to an agent AI and have it pull out its little key ring and say, okay, well, give me the 6 digits in there. I'm talking physically. I'm sure digitally that's probably the way to do it. But I'm glad to hear that we're getting smarter. And so now I'm like, okay, so this sounds pretty cool. How do I actually set this up? Like, what's it like to deploy a product like this into my environment? Does it sit there and I give it a bunch of access and kind of reads the environment and gets a discovery? And then how do I manage policies and things like that?
It's super easy. Customers have been able to do this in less than 2 hours with us. It definitely, discovery, of course, takes a little longer. Like the platform goes and actually does all the discovery of like shadow MCP servers or like shadow AI and really bring that in. But then also, that's where we kind of started, right? Like the first part of our company's history was really focused on doing that shadow AI discovery in a way. But where we've been really, where it can really make it easy is like, again, remember everything I was saying at the beginning, ease of use and one-click deployments and things like that. Admins can come in. We've had customers able to do this in less than 2 hours and roll this out in their organizations. Of course, controlled environments, not like okay, go, it's done in Wild West. Because obviously this world is changing so fast, and but we've made it absolutely easy and giving you the right set of controls to roll it out. Literally, we've had customers successfully launch it in less than 2 hours, and to a point where in certain cases they've just given them, hey, here it is. You can just go create this tenant and go play with it. I literally last week, I wish I could have shared some of those Slacks that I got. The person was able to use it, connect it, and he said, oh, everything was quite intuitive. This is awesome. And the reason we actually enforced him to do that, because of that, the iPhone analogy I was trying to make, you do not need a manual for it. We want to build a product that nobody needs a manual. At the end of it, we are in the age of AI, and we're trying to build a product to solve for AI. If we need a manual for that product, we've failed somewhere miserably,
That's a pretty quick, time to value to deploy, be able to deploy it so quickly. Once I've got it deployed, I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that I can do, maybe from like a policy standpoint as an administrator? Do I define and say, here's a list of my resources or my different AI agents, or like, what does this look like for me as let's just call it a security administrator? I don't even know what the right role would be, but to say, okay, I've got Natoma installed. Now what?
You get it up and running. You can control, you can create these MCP servers, whatever you want to connect let's pick Cursor as an example. You want to connect Cursor to whatever tools, you can do that one-click deployment of your MCP servers and roll it out to your end users. And just the end users see these servers that are available to them that they can go and connect back to. Connect their courses of the world back to those tools like Linear or Atlassian or GitHub or whichever one you want. Or on the flip end, whatever IT operation tickets you're trying to connect, like, hey, you want your ChatGPT, or like enterprises have these wrappers around ChatGPT. You want to go connect to Okta and SailPoint and CyberArk and ServiceNow. to solve some of those common use cases, and like like a lot of these use cases that can automatically be reduced having like an AI coding assistant. So you can create these, spin up these MCP servers. They are kind of managed by like the IT admins, and they can go connect back to your GPTs. End users can connect to their coding assisting tools, and boom, now all the data is kind of going through it. But not only that, we can, as we go and connect to it, we can discover any shadow MCP servers or shadow AI that's out there, any of those that have, some people might have already rolled out. So from security professionals, they start getting some of these controls there. And the other benefit, as I was kind of mentioning, there are a lot more uh, other security benefits, right? Like if you think about it, like what are the new age vulnerabilities that are coming in, like shadow MCP, I'm sorry, malicious MCP servers, tool poisoning, tool hijacking, rug pull attacks. So having like a platform that has actually verified MCP servers, we've actually built like a MCP scanner, security scanner, and contributed back to the community. So we scan, make sure that none of those vulnerability exists, making sure that all of these are uh, doing vulnerability management, version management, all of that you get out of the box straight away.
Yeah, it sounds pretty interesting. I was going to ask you about the sort of what happens if I have my own MCP servers, but you pull those in. I think this is probably something that might be getting overlooked is what happens if a rogue MCP ends up getting out there? You're able to detect that and then, surface that for somebody to do something about it, either block it or whatever.
Even before, even before we onboard like an host an MCP server, we will make sure that we have a scanner and check and make sure they kind of fit in, that there are no vulnerabilities. We find those vulnerabilities, we make sure that, hey, these are fixed. Again, depends on like it's community developed, who's contributed to it. So we look at those MCP, like those vulnerabilities. A lot of times we've actually, because it's such an early in the game, we've actually taken back those and we said, hey, we need to fix all of these things. Let's go ahead and fix it. And then we have them the right hosted one. And we have like version controls on top of that as well. Enterprises have actually also built their own MCP servers for their own custom applications. We've been able to bring those as well. We are also building MCP servers for different agents as well.
So I have to ask, I'm kind of curious, and kind of my last question for you here is this idea of shadow AI and shadow MCP. I'm curious if your customers, and I don't want you to name and shame or anything like that, but this is more of a, are they discovering like shadow MCP servers out there where developers have not done something? Because I'm not finding a lot of regulation and governance yet within organizations on how to even tackle the governance of, how do we set up AI within our own organization, those sorts of things.
I'm so glad you kind of asked this question. Developers are super smart and they will try out these new protocols and they'll download random MCP servers without thinking about security, without thinking about access. So when we go connect, we go and find so many of these shadow MCP servers.
So you're climbing this giant mountain of AI. And so that's my perfect segue into sort of ending the conversation here on a lighter note. We were talking as we were getting to know each other, before we hit record here. And you mentioned that you like the outdoors and hiking and sort of things like that. And I'm curious, like, what is your most memorable hike or climb or whatever way you want to describe it?
My most memorable definitely would be the Mount Whitney hike. That's the highest peak in lower 48 continuous United States. It is. It took us, believe it or not, like we were slow. We were hiking with the group. We made sure we did it with the group. The entire group made it up. Came back down. It took us more than 24 hours. We were hiking for 26 hours nonstop. Generally, people take like 18 to 20 hours is the norm, but we were a bit slow. But it was one of those hikes that really challenges you, and very, very vivid memories of the entire hike. But the funny story, to a point where like it became so painful that coming down, not me, somebody else. They were so tired. They were actually hiking backwards. So if you've been hiking down for too long, it does get hard on your knees, of course. Hiking backwards is actually a little bit easier. So, of course, not on the rocky parts and not on the switchbacks. There are like some 120 switchbacks on the top, near the top. But eventually, when we were hiking down, the guy just started hiking backwards.
Okay, so this is new to me. I've never heard of hiking backwards. So you're essentially walking backwards down the mountain. Am I describing that? I mean, it seems almost like a comic book.
It doesn't sound funny, but you actually see it as quite funny. We still give,
but it's better for
him a hard time.
Or I guess it's where you're more comfortable or something.
I guess it's just better for your knees because you are constantly hiking down. It just keeps hurting. Knee keeps hurting, and 26 hours. It was a long day for sure. And like 26 hours, out of those 26 hours, we would be at least hiking for maybe 23. We spent like good 30, 45 minutes on the top at the summit. But it was truly worth it. We did light up a cigar. We did take some alcohol. Did not have the energy to drink it, but we did definitely light up a cigar.
So you must have some really good pictures kind of being
my God,
there.
Yes. Of course. Yes.
How about animals? Did you come across any bears, mountain lions, yetis?
Fortunately, no. Fortunately, no. I don't. Nothing. Actually, it's very close to. I don't know if you know, but Mount Whitney is close to. It's like Central California, so
it's like east of. It's like east of San Francisco, kind of like in between San Francisco and Las Vegas, and like that area, right?
Exactly. It's southeast of San Francisco, and it's near Death Valley. Basically, it's very close to Death Valley, so it does get doesn't get hot or anything, but it's a very barren land as such. So you don't really get any of those, or at least fortunately, we did not see any of those. Now,
that sounds pretty fascinating.
If you're hiking Half Dome, you might end up with bears and stuff, which also I've done. Half Dome was also a good hike. But yeah.
Well, see, I don't need to hike anywhere because I have bears in my yard here in Asheville, North Carolina. So, I have black bears, so they're not typically, looking for trouble, mostly for food and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I guess that's it for today. As we exit the conversation here, what is something that you want the audience out there to know about Natoma and the way you guys are thinking about approaching this agentic AI explosion? Again, there's the word again that we've been seeing here.
We are definitely at an explosion inflection point. No, I mean, generally there has been this apprehension about like, oh, what will AI do and how it's going to kill jobs and like it's going to like have massive problems. I would say do not be afraid of it. Like this, we went through as a society, we did the same thing back in 70s, 80s when computers were kind of coming up. There was this fear that, oh my God, what's going to change? And then in 90s when internet was coming up and it's like, oh my God, it's going to take away all these jobs and things like that. We are at a similar inflection point. So adopt it, but hey, as you are adopting and accelerating, Natoma can really help you accelerate without actually compromising security.
Well, I love that message because I think this is something we can't stick our heads in the sands. We have to understand it. It is a tool and we'll figure out how to use it. Like you said, we've been through this cycle before with computers, electricity, indoor plumbing, right? These things, the internet, right? All these things come along and we just have to figure out how to adapt to it. So Paresh, I really appreciate you taking the time with us today and definitely want to encourage people to go out to your website, natoma.id, Natoma. We'll have links in our show notes for be able to find that website as well as connect with you, Paresh, on LinkedIn so people could share hiking stories or, what the heck are you talking about with MCP servers, help, things like that. So again, really appreciate Paresh. And for everyone watching, listening, you can find us on the web, idacpodcast.com. Don't forget that like and subscribe button. And we'll go ahead and leave it there. Thanks, everyone, for watching and or listening, and we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.